Hello, I'm Barry Forshaw. I'm the author of Crime Fiction: A Reader's Guide. My pick for the best adaptation of a great crime novel is The Big Sleep. It's Raymond Chandler's best crime novel, and Howard Hawks did a very good job of the film adaptation, with people like William Faulkner, no less, working on the adaptation. You've got Bogart and Bacall at their prime, and you've got a screenplay that even manages to get in a metaphor for sexual intercourse in an era when censorship was at its height. What about that? So I'll go for The Big Sleep.
Hello, I'm Sarah Ward, and I'm appearing at Perfect Crime on Saturday at 1 o'clock as Rhiannon Ward are talking about Gothic fiction along with Ellie Griffiths and Margaret Murphy. And I'll be interviewing Anne Cleeves at 3 o'clock as myself. But at 5 o'clock, there's a panel on adaptations of crime novels onto the screen, and we've been asked to choose our favourite. My absolute favourite, and there are plenty to choose from, but my absolute favourite is the 1979 adaptation of John le Carré's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I love spy fiction anyway, and of course John le Carré is the master of it. And I don't remember the TV series from the first time round, but it was repeated in the 90s on television, and that's how I got to know the series. It features, here's the recent Blu-ray of it. It features Alec Guinness as George Smiley, and interestingly, there's a Derbyshire connection where I live to George Smiley, because he was modelled not so much by John le Carré, but certainly by Alec Guinness, on the MI6 chief, Sir Maurice Oldfield, who was from the village about two villages down from me here in Derbyshire. And so Alec Guinness's portrayal is a mixture of the George Smiley in the book and the real life Sir Maurice Oldfield. It has a brilliant cast of characters. I mean, there's faultless performances. So you've got Ian Richardson, who plays Bill Hayden. You've got a small cameo from Sir Patrick Stewart as Carla, and a cameo from Beryl Reid. Beryl Reid usually plays Beryl Reid, but in this she's actually very good at Connie Sachs, who's now been retired because she suspects there's a mole in the circus. Other people are Michael Jason, who plays Peter Gwilym, and there's Jerry Westerby, who's played by Joss Ackland, who I absolutely love as well. I suppose these days it might be called slow TV. It's the action rolls out very slowly. George Smiley is convinced that there is a Russian mole in MI6, and he has been asked to investigate the possibility by Oliver Lacon, who's a civil servant played by the excellent Anthony Bate, and he helped by Peter Gwilym, who's gone slightly rogue, and Mendel, played by George Sewell. Now, George Sewell appears in a lot of spy fiction in the on TV in the 1970s, and together they work out who might be the mole in MI6. I can't say any more than that because it's a classic whodunit really, and the denouement is wonderful. The book's brilliant, the TV series is excellent, and if you haven't seen it, I'm really jealous because you're in for a treat when you start watching it. So that's my favourite adaptation. Good luck to everybody at Perfect Crime. I'm sorry we can't be there in person. I went to university at Liverpool and I really love the city, but hope to make it next year. Bye.
So I spent a little time thinking about which adaptation I would pick as my favourite from crime fiction, and I decided to go with an Agatha Christie because that's my area, and so it makes sense for me to pick my favourite of those. But even so, there's at least a dozen I could have picked from really. But I've decided to go with Witness for the Prosecution, the 1957 Billy Wilder film. And the reason I've gone for that is because it's brilliant, but also because Agatha Christie had written The Witness for the Prosecution as a short story, which is a great, fantastic short story. She then adapted it herself to the stage, which is even better. And then Billy Wilder managed to make that stronger again in many ways for the screen by adding more characterisation, by adding humour. And I think really cementing what the relationships between the characters were like. So although the stage play is fantastic, Billy Wilder managed to add even more to it, which is no mean feat. So that's why it's my choice.
Hi, my name's Jane Corrie and I'm the author of 5 Penguin best-selling thrillers. I'm very excited about appearing at the Perfect Crime Festival, and I'm going to be on a panel this Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock talking about murder with research in mind. Now, I didn't always write thrillers. I started off by writing romance, and then I took a job at a high security prison where my writing began to get a bit darker. But I have always wondered whether writing is in the blood or whether it's circumstantial. And that's what brings me to the book I'd like to talk about today. I've been asked to recommend a thriller which I'd like to see on television or in the cinema. And I don't suppose you will have heard of this book. It's called Numbers Up, and it's written by a man called Frank Romer. It was written many years ago in the 20s, and this is a picture of Frank. Now, I have to say here that Frank was actually my great-grandfather, and I didn't know many people on my mother's side of the family because they died by the time I was born, but I did know that Frank was a doctor. It wasn't, however, until 3 years ago that I discovered he was also a writer on the quiet and had been published by 2 major publishing houses. Numbers Up is a crime book. It's about a man who tries to get his best on the racecourse by beating criminals and trying to win. And it's quite a complicated book, and the language is rather archaic. But to me, it shows a side of the family and of me that I didn't know about. Old-fashioned books like this are actually great comfort reading during the situation that we're in. More and more people are turning to them. So I found myself during lockdown reading this from cover to cover. I love the feel of the book. You can see here the brown marks on it. And I love the big print. And the whole way in which this crime book is written is completely different from thrillers nowadays. There's much more detail about character, there are shorter characters, and the pace is not as fast. But for me, it was a complete eye-opener because it showed that maybe there is something about this writing being in the blood after all. So if you have time, look him up on Amazon, Frank Romer. This one's Numbers Up, but he also wrote others. And you might just find it a welcome distraction from everything else that's going on. See you on Saturday. Bye.